present, Councilmember Crummell is present, and Councilmember Contreras is present, and Mayor Moss is present.
Thank you. If we all stand, we have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and you may be seated. Alicia, do we have any public comments?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. First agenda item is approve the city council meeting minutes of September the 8th, 2020.
There were some corrections made from the packet, and I put a copy of the corrected minutes in front of everyone.
Okay.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as corrected and presented.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? All opposed?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't here for the meeting.
Okay. I forgot. Thank you. Item number 1, to consider and act on adopting ordinance, I think that's 8 what?
80920 is what mine is.
80920, an ordinance providing for the adoption of the City of Willow Park municipal budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. Mr. Grimes.
This is an ordinance that adopts the budget. We've had a budget workshop, a public hearing on the budget, and we've had some discussions back and forth on certain amendments and changes to the budget. This is pretty much a flat budget, as we've discussed, going all the way back to April. And staff is advising the council to adopt the budget. Any questions?
Do we have a motion to adopt the budget?
Do we need to read this as,
The caption, yeah, you want to read, Alicia, the caption of the ordinance?
the ratification?
As first we adopt the ordinance first, a record vote, and then we have a
Okay.
separate ratification vote.
No, oh, I'm sorry. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Willow Park, Texas, providing for the adoption of a municipal budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2020, and ending September 30th, 2021, providing that expenditures for said fiscal year shall be made in accordance with said budget, providing that this ordinance shall be cumulative of all ordinances, providing a severability clause, providing a savings clause, and providing an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance as read.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And I'll need to ask everyone how they vote. Ms. Fennell, how do you vote?
No,
No?
no,
Mr. Runenbaum?
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
Eric?
Aye.
Leah?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-1.
Now we must do a separate ratification vote.
We've got to have a separate ratification since this budget will raise total property tax revenue than the budget for the previous fiscal year. We must take a separate ratification vote on the budget ordinance. Do we have a motion for the ratification vote? Do we need to read an ordinance?
No, sir.
Okay.
That's just it.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, again, do we need to read this one?
Move to ratify the adoption of the budget.
This is still the budget.
Yes, still the budget.
Same
Right,
ordinance.
right. But do we need to read it per this paragraph? or-
No, that's the next item under the
Okay.
tax rate ordinance.
So I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance 809-20
It's just like, it's moved to ratify.
Move to ratify, excuse me. 809-20, an ordinance providing for the adoption of the City of Willow Park budget for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And I'll ask everyone how they vote. Ms. Fennell?
No.
Mr. Runningbaum?
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
Eric?
Aye.
Ms. Young?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you. Item number 2, to consider and act on adopting ordinance. Is that 820-20?
810-20.
81020, an ordinance adopting an ad valorem tax rate and levy on assessed property not to exceed 0.5367 per $100 valuation for tax year 2019 for the City of Willow Park, Texas, including a levy of debt obligations, .2685, and a levy of maintenance operations, .2682, consistent with the fiscal year 2019-220 municipal budget.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, the tax rate for M&O is .2685, and interest and sinking is .2682. They were backwards.
Okay. Do we have a motion, please?
We have to read the
Ordinance.
We have to read the ordinance.
Okay.
The caption you were reading.
An ordinance levying the 2020 ad valorem taxes of the City of Willow Park, Texas on all taxable property within the corporate limits of the city, not exempt by law, providing revenues for payment of current municipal expenses and for interest and sinking funds on outstanding City of Willow Park bonds, providing for the enforcement of collection, providing for a severability clause, and providing an effective date, and I will fix the misprint before it's signed.
Okay.
It's got a wrong word in there, I'll take care of
Okay.
it.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
And this one needs to be precisely as it's stated in that paragraph.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate .5367, which is effectively a 6.2% increase in the tax rate as set forth in the ordinance.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Fennell, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Runnenbaum?
Yes.
Mr. Crummell?
Yes.
Mr. Contreras?
Aye.
Ms. Young?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-1. Item number 3, to consider and act on a final plat of a replat of Lot 3, Block A, Crown Bluff Addition, City of Willow Park, County, Texas.
You got the wrong agenda.
Yeah, that's not,
I think you're on the minutes.
I'm sorry?
I think you're on the minutes from last, instead of the agenda for
It
tonight.
says Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020.
somebody gave you the wrong.
What is it?
He's got the wrong agenda. He's got the draft.
Oh,
I printed this off, but I didn't. Okay, I'm sorry. Item number 3, property swap for waste treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Grimes.
Pursuant to previous council action, we RFP'd for a property swap for a potential wastewater treatment plant facility. We received one bid from, let me pull that agenda item up real quick. We received a bid from Willow Park Baptist Church on Friday at 10 o'clock. 10:15 is when we opened it. The property itself is valued at $1,035,000, and City Attorney Chesser has reviewed the documents, and I think it's an acceptable agreement.
Well, they've met all the terms of the
Yes.
bid. They've submitted a contract, proposed contract for exchange. I've read through it, just a few little changes. We still also need to work on getting the lease agreement. This will be an exchange, and then they're going to lease back to us our existing sewer plant for a 3-year period until we can complete construction of the other plant. So we'll have a separate lease agreement. And so what we'll do is we'll bring this back to you for final approval on the contract and lease at the next council meeting on the 13th. And so if you want to move to approve it, my suggested motion would be moved to award a bid for the exchange of property to Willow Park Baptist Church, subject to the negotiation of a final contract for exchange. Such contract to be approved by the council.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve as read.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions or discussion?
You think that you can get that all negotiated, the lease agreement and everything by
The contract's close.
Okay.
Marcel Olson did a real good job on the contract, so I don't think it'll have a problem getting the lease
No
agreement with them either.
Okay.
I just like to get that done before we approve it, just so it just makes
Right.
it simpler.
And just to clarify, the swap and the exchange is contingent upon funding from water.
Yes, the whole, the contract provides just what we said in the bid specs, which is if we don't get funding, we terminate.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
We did, Amy.
Yeah.
We have a second. All in favor? Thank you. Item number 4, water update. Mr. Grimes. Or Mr. Turner.
Yeah, sorry. At the request of Councilwoman Fennell, we were going to have this on the agenda for the September 8th meeting, and due to various situations, we've decided to present this to you guys tonight. And Derek has provided the presentation. I think that's included in your packet, actually.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. So we were asked to provide some information and some discussion about the well capacity for your system, the development, the number of development units and and how that impacts the projections, and then the Fort Worth water line schedule were the specific items that I recall being asked about. And so going to kind of try to go through that. I'm going to jump around that particular list a little bit, but just a little bit of background first, related to the projections and the well capacities, and the first one being that projections that have been made, and I'm going to kind of go into which ones we've done or what has been done, is generally based on previous year data. And so for you guys, that includes a lot of years of rationing. Not completely, but a lot of years with rationing involved. So that impacts the numbers, and specifically in this, for what I want to bring to this discussion related to that is the well production and how that impacts how we see the well production. So, but when we talk about well capacity, there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what we're talking about, because you've got well production or well pumpage, and then you, for what, at least the way I'm going to term it for this discussion, and then well capacity or rated capacity. So from a regulatory standpoint, the well capacity that you have currently is 1.7 MGD. Okay, and that's, so if you drill a well, one of the first things you do once you get it active is you bring the flow up to the maximum that it can sustain for a specific period of time. And that's how you determine what the rated capacity is. And that could be, whenever the well is drilled. So we've drilled 3 new wells recently. One of those was in the summertime, one was in the winter, I think one was somewhere in between. So the situation with the aquifer impacts what that rating will be, but you have to have a baseline, and you'll see in a minute some other charts I have why that's important, because things change, rapidly in the aquifer over time. So just to distinguish between the two, and the well production or the well pumpage can change based on what the aquifer conditions would be. So the well capacity, the rated capacity doesn't change. But the well production could change, and if the aquifer can't recharge as fast as it's being pumped out, But eventually, under normal circumstances, once you stop that pumping and bring it back up, then the well will generally recover back to the rated capacity. So going on, the projections, again, we made some connections, number of connections, water use projections back in 2017 for your capital improvement plan. And also, more recently revisited that in March. We did a 3-year projection, as you recall, that we'll look at shortly. A little more history. We've drilled 3 new wells, actually over about the last 18 months. I said the last year there, but it's actually been over about the last 18 months. We've also rehabbed 6 wells with the intention of recovering the existing well rated capacity. There was no expectation there that we would increase the rated capacity. We were just trying to get them back up to what they were originally putting out. So just want to point that out as well. This is the projection we did in March. If you look at, there's a line right after 2019. The year 2019 and going back to 2017, those are actual numbers. And really the important part for this discussion, again, is the max daily flow, the 2 columns under that heading. So those numbers under max daily flow MGD, those are your actual peak day numbers for those years. And again, 2018 and 2017 were rationing years, but 2019 was not. So that's going to be important for some other discussion. And then if you look at the GPM per connection for 2019, that 0.43, that's an actual number based on the number of connections and your peak flow. So that's the number I used at that time to project forward for the next 3 years based on what your system has been using per connection. So so if you look at the MGD from 2020 down to 2023, the 1.45, 1.58, and so on, those are projected numbers. And those are projected based on the 0.43 number that I mentioned. So, and so that's how we made that projection. If you look at the available MGD on the far side, the 1.7, that is based on the pump test that we did. That's the existing wells, the most recent flow data that we had on them during peak time, which is what we had, that's how we had those rated. And then the pump testing that we had done on the new wells, and also the pump testing on the rehab wells. So at that time, that's the number we had based on actual pump data. And then if you look, we've got the Fort Worth water line coming online in 2021, and we've been through those numbers, but just to kind of illustrate how the demand can affect the pump production. This is I've got a couple of charts here that Michelle put together. This one is for the month of May of this year, which is pretty much an average month for this year. You can see the white line, the lower white line, that's your actual production, your well production. And you can see it averages about 800,000 gallons a day. If you look at the yellow flat line at the top, that's your measured well pumpage or production rate. So that's flat because that's a single instantaneous check on each well on one given day. So somebody went out, they read all the meters on all the wells and determined what GPM they were putting out and totaled them. And that's what they got. And so for whatever day that was during the month of May, that number was right at 1.6 million or just under 1.6 million. So that's what the wells would put out on that day, or at least that's what they were measuring. So if you go to the next one, this is the chart for the month of August, the month you had to go to Weatherford and initiate what stage 2, I believe. If you look at the light blue line, that's your demand. That's your actual usage for that day. The horizontal white line is the same number as the yellow line on the other one. That's the measured well production. Again, that's on a specific day of the month, instantaneous readings. But you can see that number's dropped to about 1.42 million. So during your high peak usage period, that number fell quite a bit. And so we'll take that into account as we talk about projections going shortly. And you can see that you exceeded that on 2 days for that month.
Can I ask a question, like before we go further, so don't forget them? So the 1.7 million gallons, that's what can come out of the wells, because I know you can measure that individual wells. but that's not necessarily how much is in the system, which, you know, because it has to be moved around and what have you. So, you know, whenever we measure what can come out of the wells, or what, you know, we can pull out of the wells, that's not necessarily reflective of what is available, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily in the tanks all, you know, it's not like we have 1.7 million gallons in the tanks all the time. So I was just making that distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it's two different, we're really
Yeah.
not apples to apples. I mean, we're talking about the storage facilities and the distribution system, but the supply side of it, the wells themselves,
Yeah.
is what I'm talking about.
But when the rubber hits the road, it's how much is available, like how much is actually in the system. So that was, I believe that's something worth noting. Because
Well,
when,
the system's constantly pumping from the wells, so that what's in the system's constantly being added to. And
Well, yeah, I mean, the
So
key
there's
is whether or not
stack.
you've got enough supply coming out of the ground
Right.
to fill that system. So, which we'll get into, but you did this for some period of time, so. And that's really what we're fixing to
but
discuss.
it doesn't come straight out of the ground into the tanks. It's not always in there. It's got to be moved around. You know, one of the reasons we built part of that well rehab project and the water system project, it was a $1.5 million deal that we did, was to put the SCADA equipment into air-conditioned pump houses. And I'm curious about well 9, the SCADA's not in there. I drove, it's not in the pump house. It was underneath of under a shade of like an academy tent. And, you know, to try and keep it from overheating. And the reason I make note of pump 9 is I remember Raymond referencing that it was going to make a huge difference for our system. But if SCADA trips, then we can't get that water into the system. So out of curiosity, why, the pump house is only about 10 feet from the SCADA. I don't understand why it's not in that air conditioning.
I'm not sure I have an answer because I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I think I've had the information before, but
Okay.
I'm not aware of an overall project to do anything with the SCADA. But I'm not aware that that's been tripping either. But
Okay.
I think it's in an air-conditioned outdoor rated box. But anyway, I can look into that.
It's okay.
I don't
Well,
know.
I just wonder if
specifically about
there's
that.
improvements that we can make to our system that would help pull the water into the system more effectively. So,
Yeah, I think the supply is really the issue, but if you look,
Okay.
so just a few things leading into the next slide, but, so the peak day use in 2020 was 1.61 million. I think, I corrected a typo on this yesterday, so I think the one in your packet probably says 1.51, but that's a typo, it's 1.61. That was the peak day in August of this year. I think a more telling statement is the next one, which is that you guys hit 80% of your rated well pump capacity, not the 1.7, during 3 consecutive months this year. So you pumped a lot of water out of the ground for a long period of time, which obviously has a big impact on the aquifer. And that's why, if you look at the next statement there, the well pumpage maxed out at 1.42 MGD during the highest use period, which is the chart we looked at in August. Leading up to that, you guys had been pumping, you know, like I said, you'd hit 80% of your rated capacity a number of times. So you'd been pumping pretty hard up to that period, and then you had a really high use period. So you can see how that well production drops during that period of time. A couple other things, and then I'll get on to the kind of the meat of it. But so we drilled 3 wells. There was a recommendation in your capital improvement plan in 2017 to drill 3 new wells to try to get you through the interim until the Fort Worth water was online. I'm not sure we knew that at the time or knew this at the time, but there's actually, that's all we can get. And we kind of, it was really it was iffy whether we could get the 3. But there are regulations about separation of wells. And in the ETJ of Willow Park, there is nowhere left after the 3 that we drilled where you can meet the separation requirements. So, and even if you could, based on what we saw this year, it's pretty evident that it probably wouldn't be a worthwhile pursuit. So, but the bottom line is groundwater is not going to be a solution, and there's not really an avenue to get more groundwater. So the Fort Worth supply is underway, and it's expected that the portion of that from Fort Worth to Willow Park will be in place by early next summer, June. And so the plan is, and the hope is, that you guys would be able to use that water to get you through that peak period next summer, like the same kind you had this summer. And so kind of leads to, let me go back because I skipped over that one. So there was a question about the number of units, development units. There are currently approximately 465 permitted or requested new accounts for the water system that are either under construction or underway or being connected. These are included and accounted for in the 2017 CIP, and they were also included in the March 2020 projections as well. And in fact, those March projections were really, we went back and checked to make sure we were covered in that area, but they're the same projections as the CIP. So I went and looked at that March spreadsheet again that we for a 3-year projection. Again, if you look at the 2019 and before, those are actual peak day numbers. The difference here from what you saw before is the 2020 number. I've plugged in the actual peak day, the 1.61 MGD, which led us to a new gallons per, or GPM per connection factor of 0.48. And I used that number to project forward, and you can see that those numbers increase. I also, if you look at the far right, available MGD, I used the max production, not the rated capacity, but the max production that we saw this year, which is, it worked out well this year because that 1.61 hit before your rationing actually took effect. So that's probably a realistic peak for you guys during a normal use period. And so, so we used that number, which was 1.42, and I carried that through. So you can see that there's a deficit in 2021. That's if you just account for the well production that you currently have. So, you know, the emphasis needs to be put on getting the Fort Worth water line in place and getting that interim use out of that next summer before the entire, because it's going to be some months before the final project is complete. But that is the current projections based on this year's use data.
So the 2021 projections, so I saw that there's some things that's going to just be like in the spring of 2021, and then like half of the units in 2021 on your projected time. This 2021, I'm assuming it's like for the entire year, if all those things are completed.
Well, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, the 2021 number would be the full year of 2020.
Okay.
As far as the projected meter count, it would be the max that you would see that year.
So it's something that we could kind of pace Brian, could we pace
There's some humming.
pace the development according to the Fort Worth supply coming in? Because, you know, we can't bring on all of these properties until we're already maxed out with what we currently have.
So can you say pace the development? What are you?
Pace the development. So that projection was that half of the units were going to, just one off the top of my head, half of the senior living units were going to come on in 2021. And Spring Hill Suites, I believe, is coming on in spring of 2021. And we're currently, with what we have already, our capacity is only 1.7. The peak, you said 1.61 was a good projection for a typical peak day.
Well,
And
that was for this year.
yeah, for
Next
this year
year would be higher.
Yeah, next year is going to be higher, but I'm just talking about right here, right now, nothing else being built. That's what we would be looking at, not adding anything else. that's a huge concern because how are we going to support anything else coming on? Does that make sense? I'm not confident that,
I have a couple of questions that go to that, and I think what you're doing is looking at the short term before we actually have that contract from Fort Worth. How do we make
Once
sure
it's-
we
yes.
have daily capacity? I can let you, I mean, I think we're working, trying to make sure we get water from Fort Worth before the project is complete, if I understand. Before I let you discuss that, one of my questions would be, let's say some of those options, Weatherford, Fort Worth, are not available June, like when we need them. You had mentioned that we had pumped over 80% of the rated capacity for 3 consecutive months. I don't know that we were approaching any enforcement of twice-a-week watering, which was enacted a year before. Do you have any feel for if we had been actually enforcing twice-a-week watering starting in June or whatever, would the aquifer have been able to support something higher than 1.42?
So in previous years, when you did, it had a,
We
it
could
had
go
that
up higher
effect.
to 1.6, and so that would be
So
just straight out
Really
enforcing
what-
the rules.
Yeah, really what you're doing is just trying to pull that peak on that graph down.
Right,
And the rationing, now, the key word there was enforcing it.
right,
Okay.
right.
Just publishing it is probably going to have the opposite effect, but yeah. But anyway, but leveling that peak, the rationing has had that impact in years
Okay.
past.
And
it
you
typically
believe
does.
that we could increase over that 1.42 of August?
Yeah, I would assume, like I said,
If we had to.
you went under, I think 2018 is a good example, if I
Mm-hmm.
remember correctly. You had the same type of consistent pumping over those summer months, but you were rationing and you never hit that, you never exceeded that peak number.
Okay, well, that was one of my, in different ways of trying to make up what we
Yeah.
have before the pipeline's fully functional.
well,
This
So,
is one
so
thought.
enforcement is absolutely something that we want to take a look at over the winter months and certainly get the word out. Just visiting with folks who have swimming pools, I talked to some folks last week and, we were talking about in August, their pool is filling up 3-4 times a week if it's an automatic, and I don't know how the pools operate, y'all have them, I don't, but, that's another way, it's simply more than just driving by and seeing the water being, irrigated at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's also some of the other things that would contribute to that. When me and Michelle decided after we get through with this summer season, I think we can pretty much put our high demand period to bed. We want to talk about enforcement. We want to talk about, getting roads with education. I think we can do a better job of enforcing what we have. I think we also need to do a better job of predicting, when we know that there's going to be, or is predicted to have, a week's worth of triple-digit temperatures to start to get the word out quicker than we did before.
Right. Well, I would say that 1 week that we had 110 heat indexes, had we been enforcing twice a week, the aquifer would not have
Yeah.
had such difficulty that week if we had had it not being drained the week before, so,
well, I'm in support of
yeah.
more enforcement. I don't disagree with that. My concern is that, Willow Park residents, we're cinching our belt in to just take care of what we already have. My concern is, 2021, we don't have the pipeline yet, and there's all this open space. I don't know how many acres of open space are over there in the TERS, and then also the Willow Park Baptist property, because that takes more water than anything. A lot of open space with all the watering. It has to happen when they're doing dirt work and to keep the sod, get the seed so it doesn't all wash away. From just looking at that, we're not gonna be able to cut it, and I have a hard time relying upon any kind of timeline that involves engineers and attorneys. I mean, nothing against engineers and attorneys, but just things take time, and so I don't think we can handle any new building. We're already committed to the hotel. I don't know what else we're committed to, but like I said, is there any way to pace it to where,
Are you,
hold off the apartments
are you
until
talking
the
about
summer?
putting a moratorium on new construction?
I believe anything that we've already approved, we've got to keep it going. But until we have water from Fort Worth, I believe that's something that should be seriously considered.
Okay. Well, that
Because-
would certainly be a council.
Yeah, I know, but I believe it's something, I'm bringing it up because we're talking about the water supply.
Okay.
Is our connection with Weatherford going to remain in place till we have Fort Worth connection?
The connection with Weatherford is in place. Physically, it's in place. I think it's more of a political issue than it is a physical. I know it's more political than physical.
What's the gallons per day we can get out of that if we need it?
But
Does
you
the
have to-
contract limit it to, the contract, I think, limits it to 200,000,
But we can get, I think we can get almost 3 or 4. I think.
probably at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
So
much-
that's a negotiation and.
Yes.
If we
Okay.
can get it. If we can get that contract in place. So if that's something we could get in place, because it's got to go before the utility district,
Yeah.
then that, and be able to show, okay, yeah, we can support this development until we get the pipeline. And how much, and then that we also have to look at the cost of that. How are we going to pay for that extra water? Because I don't remember, wasn't it like $30,000 last year whenever we
No.
did but it was for weeks or 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
It was for a lot longer.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about per
Yeah.
day.
And that's the thing,
But-
if we got that kind of demand,
Mm-hmm.
then, if there's demand there, we're gonna tap into it, that's our last source.
Well, yeah, if they'll approve it. And so,
Yeah, assuming all factors,
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on item number 4?
I just wanted to bring it out because people are talking about it and we haven't delivered on the numbers that we thought we were going to be able to do 1.8 million gallons after the overhaul, and which was giving us the confidence to make approvals. So these are conversations that need to be had before we're just out of water.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Derek. Item number 5, discussion action, commercial water rate market study. Mr. Grimes.
Let me pull up I apologize, let's see.
Okay. At a previous meeting, Councilwoman Fennell wanted to have a discussion on commercial water rates and perhaps initiating a study or review of our water rates. Councilwoman Fennell has put some materials in the packet for us to review and look at. Amy, I'm going to let you kind of take the lead on this and then.
Okay. Well, this is something that I've been, I first noticed how low the rates were back in 2017, before I even ran for office. Our commercial rates are very low compared to our neighbors. And in learning, as since I've been on council and learning about water conservation, the number one motivator for people to conserve water is the cost of water. And these commercial properties, it's so much lower that it really doesn't cost them much money to use exorbitant amounts of water. And so water is water, regardless of if you're a commercial property or if you're a resident. Water's like gold here. And on our biggest water customer is the apartments, and I believe they'd use 8 million gallons this year so far. Brian, do you remember what we projected for what they would use the rest of the year? Let's just say that they use 9.
They irrigate out of a well, so they're more residential consumption than they are. But yeah, it'll be, I'd say 9 million probably.
Yeah, about 9 million. So So I guess that'd be more of a, how people conserve their water, because they've got their water contracts, like in the apartments, they pay a set amount of money, and it's really not much comparably speaking to what residents pay, because they don't have, irrigation, obviously. But what's council's ideas on that?
I don't think, my personal opinion, in the pandemic and what our small businesses have endured these last 5 or 6 months, I don't think this is a good time for any time of water rate study. I think as time goes on, maybe the first of the year, or when things get back to some normalcy, and instead of 50% or 75%, businesses can get back to where they were. I would hate to approach our small businesses and talk to them about any type of water rate change right now.
I don't know that our small businesses are going to be affected that much. I think it's going to be the businesses with more open spaces, like the hospital. They're watering a whole lot, and there's no way for us to enforce that. That's a very difficult thing to enforce, because they're watering in the middle of the night, and they have a board of directors. It's not like Brian can just call them up, hey, stop watering.
But if we do enforcement of our existing regulations.
But we don't have anybody driving around at 2 o'clock in the
Well,
morning.
but I think we did say on the previous item that is something we want to discuss over the winter months, is how are we going to enforce our drought contingency plan of twice a week watering, or, so I definitely think it's important that we don't have people illegally watering when we
Yeah.
told them that they get twice a week. So yes, whether it's commercial or residents, I do think that's an important thing. And I don't know, I'd prefer for that situation to go through enforcement rather than raising rates and making it cost more. I think we'd have a better result if we come up with a better enforcement program, even if it's the metering and watching it. I mean, you can tell from metering whether somebody's watering when they're not supposed to, whether it's a hospital or not, so.
Well, when we do have to do the market study,
Right.
for the Fort Worth deal, what is council's opinion on bringing the commercial rates up to where it's closer in line with what our neighbors are in relation to residential rates?
Can I
Does
ask
that
some
make sense?
questions? Okay, because first of all, when was the last water rate study done for Willow Park?
So there was a full-blown water rate study in 2013, and then there was an update by Nugent Energy in May of 17.
Okay,
Bernie, was that update for wastewater, or was it for?
Wastewater.
Just wastewater.
just wastewater in 17.
Yes.
So we haven't done a rate study since 2013.
Yes.
So we're 7 years past. So I definitely think it's something, that was one question I had. And me asking that, I obviously haven't seen it. So it'd be interesting to see what the assumptions were in that study compared to, I imagine in 7 years, they've changed quite a bit. So, so that would be nice to get a copy to be able to figure out what we're looking at, not having seen that. The process of doing it, you mentioned, did we favor it? I'm going off of when Derek presented stormwater fee study. He assessed all that information. He looked at our surrounding cities. He talked about what, I'm kind of assuming that's what a market study would be, that rather than tell you now whether I support it, we hire somebody and they present the data, and then I look at the professional opinions of what it is.
Well, I meant the appetite of council on bringing commercial rates up closer to what it looks like with our neighbors, aside from the projections. So
Okay. I guess I'm.
the percentage,
Yeah, my answer
you
would
definitely
be.
definitely
I wanna
need to
hear
see
somebody.
data.
Yeah.
But I'm just, in general, my opinion is that water is water, and commercial needs to pay for water like residents pay for water. So I was just curious as to how y'all felt about that. in
Don't
general.
we have to do a rate study anyway when we get the connection in place?
So, you would have to do, I would recommend it, since the last one was done in 2013, I would
Right.
recommend we need to do one anyway. I would wait until we get a better idea of, we know what our debt is with Fort Worth, that's set. What we don't know is what our monthly usage will be with Fort Worth. Although that's pretty much set, we're in the 56 city wholesale water contract team, whatever you call it. Those rates are negotiated every year. What we don't, the variable there is we don't know how much water we're actually going to pull off of Fort Worth and what that number is going to look like. That's certainly something that we can talk with Derek about and Michelle and see how much water we'll actually pool. That's going to establish our monthly usage. But yes, I would recommend that we do a rate study, but I would not recommend we do one now for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have Fort Worth online. And two, there's going to be a number of factors that we'll have to discuss as we move forward. Especially if you're going to do a market rate study, I spoke with NewGen, who did the last one, and I think we may have a hybrid solution if you're acceptable to it. So to do a market rate study, a commercial rate study that you're describing, it would probably cost us, and this is just the number I got, this is back of the napkin, he told me not to, don't hold him to this, but it's going to be around $5,000 to $7,500. Probably take a month to 6 weeks to complete. A full-blown rate study is going to cost anywhere from $30,000 to $35,000, and that's going to take anywhere from probably around 90 days to complete. We couldn't take action. I don't think we could take action on this. Well, maybe we could. It's an action item. But if we guaranteed NewGen a rate study, they would actually give us a total price, and then would actually do the market rate, the commercial analysis first at a price of whatever, $5,750, and then come back in when we're ready to do a rate study at a later date in the spring. Is that clear as mud?
Is there a cost break that you're putting in there?
So I think what they're going to say is they would analyze it. Let's just assume it's $35,000. It's just
In the spring.
The total rate study, the
Yeah.
whole package is $35,000. And let's just nice round number. They do the commercial rate study for
Gotcha.
$5,000. So we would pay the $5,000 up front, and then we would owe the $30,000
And then the 30.
later.
So how much do we have, would the rate, commercial rates have to increase to be on par with the neighboring cities?
We have to do,
Percentage-wise?
we need to do a study on that
But you
to
said you
find
were
out.
comparison already, so what are we, 10%
Well, I
low, 5%?
didn't plug the numbers in because I'm not supposed to do micromanage everybody.
So,
So that's why, did you look in the packet and see what our neighbors pay?
I don't remember what it was. So what's our total revenue off water expected for next year?
You got me doing math now.
Roughly $2 million.
2 million?
I think this is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And what's the commercial impact?
So if you just look at demand, and demand equates to revenue, your commercial accounts is probably roughly 15% of your total demand across the board in January through December. Residential is going to account for roughly 85% of your.
So it translates dollar for dollar, so about 300,000 is the commercial.
Yeah. If you're going to go up on rates, you need to answer this question. Is it for revenue purposes or for conservation purposes?
It's for conservation and what's fair. Water's water.
If you're going up on commercial rates, are you proposing going down on residential?
I think that it would be a good starting point. I don't know if we're going to be able to go down on the residential rates because we don't know what the rates are going to have to be with Fort Worth water yet. Am I correct, Brian? You said we're going to have to, that's what
But if we
that's
wait
my
6
understanding.
months, we'll be able to do that data. So if we just
Well,
hold off and do it all holistically together
well, if he's going
and do
to,
everything.
if they're going to give us the $5,000 credit anyway, to go ahead and if we do it now, and they're going to credit us that $5,000, it's not really going to cost us anything in the long run, because we'll have to pay $35,000 for the full study. It's a nice round number, I realize it's not an exact number, but if they'll go ahead and give us that. This is a step of good faith for the public, just to show them, our residents, hey, look, we're looking at what's fair, we're listening to you, we hear you, I think that's what this is. And it will have a return with the conservation aspect there.
I don't think it's a good time to do any type of water rate study. I think if we wait until we get Fort Worth Water online, we're going to have to do it anyway, and I think that's a much better time to do it all at once.
I had one other comment or question, and we're talking 35, this is just a back of the napkin thing from our previous consultant. Is it worth looking at other consultants? Do we need to do RFQs? Do we need to, what's the process that,
So,
should we just go with the guys we used before, or should we,
you know,
because that will take months too.
yeah,
We-
so 50,000 is your threshold for.
Right,
you
for
have
being able
procure.
to not.
For something like this, you could do procurement. There's probably a handful, I can probably think of 4 or 5 off the top of my head. I can't think of that. I mean, you know,
Okay.
Patrick I've consulted with Patrick Lawler about who he used. So there's a number of people, that would, I think would be interested in doing and working
Okay.
with us. And then, I don't know if that would drive your price down or not. I think we need to find out what the price is gonna be before we take any action tonight. I wanna be clear about that. I don't wanna sit there and enter into an agreement if we don't know what the price tag's gonna be. But, and if you're gonna wait till the 13th, it wouldn't hurt to just wait anyway. They also recommended that we don't do anything until after October 1. Most cities are going to change their water rates as the new fiscal year begins. He also recommended that we don't do anything until after January 1 because they will change their rates either October 1, January 1, or February 1. That's typically when municipalities adjust their rates.
So would it make sense to start looking at figuring out the procurement of who we want to look at and then table any action on that till after the first of the year but start the process, and I don't know whether that needs action or not, but to direct staff to look into
You could authorize us to put an RFP out for we could do
RFQs or,
We could do a rate study, and then we could also do an addendum to it for a commercial rate analysis.
So it's more comparable with the way,
I would think it would be a good idea to hear at least some sort of presentation from those type of companies of what makes sense based on where we are. If we're 6 months away from finishing water in Fort Worth, do they recommend, say, And so I kind of hear you saying that, but I'm not saying I don't trust you, but, hearing them say it makes a difference of, does it make sense to do part of it now, get 6 months ahead? Does it make sense to say everything moves slow? So that's my thoughts on it, is that I absolutely agree we need a market rate study. We need to do it. It's just whether we need to start it now in October 2020 or whether we need to start the process potentially after the first of the year when we're a little bit closer to some final numbers.
I want to be clear though. I think you definitely want to do a rate study. I think you
Okay.
because under Amy's water is water, and she's absolutely right. But that's going to impact your commercial rates. It's also going to impact your residential rates
Right.
when you come onto Fort Worth.
Right.
And that's your X factor, is that you don't know.
well, and I think that we should go to the residents last. Does that make sense? Let's see what we can do to make up that gap that's there, that's going to be there, because rates are going to have to go up or whatever. You exhaust other avenues. The whole reason to bring in commercial property is for the benefit of the residents. It's for the benefit of the community. It alleviates, our tax burden, our burden to live here. And water's water. And I believe that we could, it's not going to keep development out, because you look at Hudson Oaks, their rates are higher, and it's not keeping it out. Their commercial rate's higher than ours. It's not keeping them out. And Benbrook's the same way, their commercial rate's higher than ours, and it doesn't keep development out. So people understand.
I absolutely take your point. I think it's going to impact your small businesses. I think your bigger businesses can absorb it easier than your, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do something, but I am saying it's that your mom and pop, deli or diner or restaurant, they will feel an impact. Your commercial accounts is pretty much flat across the board. Your demand, and as far as your conservation point, your demand is those months of June, July, and August when the residents are using a lot of water.
And when dirt work's being done.
Well, they are using a lot of water.
Yeah, those tankers are like, what, 30,000 gallons, 25,
But
something like that.
that's pretty much flat across. That's going to be used. The commercial construction is going to be about the same. We pumped 30 million gallons in the last building cycle in August. We pumped maybe 10 or 12 in January.
Mm-hmm.
And so commercial was the same in January as it was in the summertime. But the residential was the variable. The residential was what caused that spike in that demand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know if you get where you need to go or where you want to go with conservation if you're just going to up the rates on commercial.
Okay.
Blue Bonnet Kitchens is going to use the same amount of water, whether.
Okay, well, maybe going back into tying into what I said about pacing when developments come online.
Okay.
Okay.
Do something to encourage dirt work to not be done in August.
And
Because
I think now-
my family has land and you do dirt work in the fall because you have to have rain.
Okay, item number 5, what's the council's pleasure?
I would like to direct staff to look at the consultants that we could use for this and table acting on that until we get more information that staff will present to us at a later date. Is that
So RFP, is that what you said?
RFP, RFQ,
Get us some quotes, get us,
Yeah,
get you
just,
some-
just determine and give us a little more information about how the process would work and timing.
Okay.
And the timing of when it would need to be.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. So I guess my motion would be that staff prepares information regarding RFPs and we table acting, so officially to table
So,
a commercial water rate study action until a later date.
We have a motion to table. Do we have a second? We have a second, all in favor? Thank you. Item number 6, to consider and act on items considered for future council meetings.
perhaps that item.
we have, of course, the next meeting will be the first meeting of the fiscal year, so we have some administrative things that we'll bring up for you guys. We will potentially have a property swap contract for you guys to look and review. We will probably be bringing up, assuming the swap is acceptable to council, we will be amending the preliminary engineering report to indicate that that location is now the preferred location to Water Development Board, so we'll be amending that as well. There was something else. No, I'm drawing a blank. But
Do you want mine?
yes.
I apologize. I hadn't had a chance to follow up over the last few weeks. I recall that we were going to finalize the stormwater rate study.
That
So
was
I
it.
think, okay, I was going to say, I think that needs to be finalized, that study, so we can do something there. And the last time I spoke with Betty, a couple of weeks ago, she mentioned getting the zoning ordinances.
Yes.
Okay, so zoning, so there you
Yeah.
go.
She presented that at the last meeting.
Okay, but I think she has more to do. That was his first step. And then,
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
so I didn't know if that, so, okay.
Okay? Act on setting the date and time for the next council meeting.
Next meeting is scheduled for October the 13th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
Okay? I have no comments. Thanks, everyone, for your participation. Mr. Grimes, you have anything?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I have a comment, but you go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Tonight, was very significant to me personally with the property swap. I became involved with the city 4.5 years ago after learning that the city wanted to build a wastewater treatment plant in the heart of Willow Park. I worked along with others to get information out to the public about what was happening, and about 200 residents showed up for a town hall meeting and made it clear that they wanted the new plant to stay at its current location. Because of the people, the city stepped back and considered alternatives. Fast forward 4.5 years to now, and it's come full circle. Just a few months ago, the city was looking at put a plant in a location that the people, again, were not happy with, and what happened? The people showed up, and I feel tremendously proud of that. Because of their tenacity and civil involvement, we took notice, like the previous officials from 4.5 years ago took notice, but this time, our mayor came through, and I give him praise for that. Mayor Moss made it happen, and I believe that only he could have pulled it off. The new plant will be built within a stone's throw of the current location, and that is a victory for all of Willow Park, and it brings my journey to an end. It's no secret that these past 8 months have been incredibly difficult for me on council. I've been in a lot of prayer and have stayed the course because of how much I love the people. I love Willow Park like family. And my passion is to serve others. It's part of who I am. I couldn't give up on it, but I've been working to find a more effective way to live out that passion than where I am right now, and I believe that I have found it. About a year ago, Stacy Lynch started talking to me about coming to work for her. We've had countless conversations about how to make commercial development work for a community, and she's building a team at Lynch Legacy Group to make that happen. She's going to make that happen the right way, and I've made the decision to join her. I originally planned to finish my term before starting a career, but God made it clear last week that now it's the time. It's a tremendous opportunity for me to better serve my community, but in order to do so, I cannot continue working on council. It's simply a conflict of interest. I've weighed everything out, and even if I stayed above it and abstained from certain votes, it still has the look of impropriety, and the one thing I believe I have with the public is their trust. Trust is what Stacy has established at Lynch Legacy, and I want to be part of it. I want to build something better. So tonight is my last night as a councilwoman in Willow Park. I will submit a letter of resignation to Mayor Moss tomorrow, but I chose to share this in open session because I wanted the public to be the first to know. You're my family. You put me here, and you deserve to hear it from me. I love this community, and I'm proud of the difference that you're making. I thank you for all that you've done, and I encourage you to be kind, have courage, and stay involved. Y'all keep taking care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Mr. Grimes?
Well, Amy, let me be the first to thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've done on this council. Thank you for keeping me accountable. You have served this community well, and I appreciate it, and I know the staff does as well. And so this will be an interesting transition. But I know you will do well in your new career and your new endeavor. And from the staff and from myself, we wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
Amy, we wish you well with your new career and wish you much happiness and success.
Thank you, Doyle.
Mayor, if I could, I'd like to say a word. I didn't have any comments prepared tonight, but Councilwoman Fennell, I just want to say thank you so much. Since day one, I started showing up at council meetings here. You recognize that. You encouraged me to get involved. You challenged me a lot. And I really appreciate the friendship. And thank you so much for everything you've done for council, the community, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Okay. Ms. Fennell, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Thank you, and we're dismissed.